Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's panel discussion from Virginia Community Capital. I'm Bill Greenleaf, and I manage the real estate lending team at VCC. Our discussion will focus on pandemic-era repercussions and the response in the real estate development sector. We're pleased to have two accomplished developers, Dave McCormick and Ed Walker, with us today to share their experience and thinking. First, a few announcements. I want to recognize and thank our co-host, McGuire Woods Consulting and the Virginia Economic Developers Association that helped us promote this event to their clients and constituents. To those of you that are not familiar with Virginia Community Capital, a little bit of background. VCC is a 14-year-old community development financial institution that operates statewide. We provide loan capital with a focus on community impact in the areas of affordable housing, community revitalization, small business, clean energy, and food access. We were founded in Christiansburg, and now also have offices in Richmond and Norfolk. Of course, we've had our own pandemic response experience, and I'm happy to say that VCC is meeting the moment as engaged as ever in new business throughout the Commonwealth. During today's session, all participants will be muted, and we will take questions at the end of the discussion. We ask that you submit your questions through the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, not the chat feature. My colleague, Leah Freeman, will help at the end with a Q&A. This session will be recorded. We will ask the panelists two questions and then turn to your questions. The first question will be, how has the pandemic impacted your current operations? Second question will be, how is the pandemic impacting your longer-term planning? Now let me introduce our panelists. First, Dave McCormick is the founder of Waukesha Development in Petersburg, where they completed their first historic renovation of a building into market-rate apartments in 2006. Dave and his team have completed over 24 historic renovation projects across Virginia in places like Cape Charles, Martinsville, Bedford, Amherst, and Blackstone. A few years ago, he also ventured into craft beer, launching Trapezium Brewery in Petersburg and Beals Beer in Bedford. Ed Walker is the founder of Commonwealth Capital Partners and Regeneration Partners based in Roanoke. Starting out in 2002, Ed was an early leader in the historic redevelopment in Roanoke, where he's been involved in the rescue and repurposing of more than 20 historic properties. Since then, he's also expanded into other areas in Virginia, such as Danville. He also helped create a business incubator and co-working space in Roanoke. So now let's go to the first question. We'll start with Dave. Dave, can you tell us how the pandemic impacted your business?
Sure. Well, we are in lots of different businesses. We're in brewing, but also we have apartments and retail, industrial. We're in all sorts of things. And I would say when we first heard about all this happening back in March, I was very resistant to it and resistant to change because, of all the things we had built and all the energy we had put into everything. But we did have a really rough 45 days or so, through into May. But oddly enough, it's crazy to even be saying this right now here in October. And I think it speaks volumes about the team that we have and the relationships we have and some of the things we've built. And I'll get into some detail on this, but we're actually having a bizarrely tremendous year. And it's really crazy. And I think we're the beneficiaries, like I said, of a lot of the relationships we built, the way we built some of these businesses. And, it's a strange thing, but I'm really happy to be in some of the small progressive towns that we're in. And we're having a very good year. Our occupancy is the highest it's ever been in some of our apartment projects. Our rents are climbing a little. And on the brewing side, I think we're really the big beneficiaries of our outdoor spaces and our ability to have pivoted in the face of some of the adversity that we have seen. So I would say, generally speaking, we're in a good spot right now. We are very cautious about what's going to happen over the winter when people are starting to use their inside spaces. But generally speaking, I'm sure we found ourselves in a surprising place here at the end of October 2020.
And Dave, were there any key decisions you made early on that kind of set the stage for where you are right now?
So, I would say two things. On the retail brewing side, one of the biggest things that we did, we just got way, way out in front of some of these, pandemic proofing the businesses. So we were very early with deciding to do, the way we treated the indoor space, the masking and all that kind of stuff, which at first, really, I would say was jarring to our customers, but we did that early and made a really, big public decision and display to do that. And I think that really helped. It created consistency, and it took confusion out of the programming for our customers. On the apartment side, we have spent years and years building up the credit worthiness of our clientele. We have hundreds and hundreds of apartments, and we were expecting, waves of evictions and lots of problems. And the crazy thing about it, I think all that hard work and the building of that business we had done really paid off. It turns out we had almost no evictions, and on our vacancy is almost 100%. So I think, it's times like this you realize if you've done a good job, building up to it. I would say too, our banking relationships, frankly, have really very much been, really important. We made a decision years ago to work with some, community banks over some of the big players, and I will say that has been a huge benefit to us, and those relationships are really important. It's all paying off in times like this.
And Dave, one last question before we go to Ed. You probably have some projects under construction. Any impacts there?
Yeah, well, the big impact is we're seeing the cost of building materials climb. It's a very active time right now. I don't think anyone could really have predicted that the housing market would just like take off right in the middle of a pandemic, or prices would start to skyrocket. But that's what we've seen. We have 7 projects in development right now, and we are, for a couple of those, we're seeing lumber prices climbing and still trying to tweak our pricing, but we're very up on the market. I really don't think that this is, it seems like it's taking forever, the effects of the pandemic, but I really strongly believe and that things are going to get better into 2021 at some point. And so we're very upbeat on the market in both the apartment side and the retail brewing side. We've got a couple projects in that realm underway. So, we're full speed ahead.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Ed, I want to share your experience. I know you have some real estate as well as some non-real estate companies as well.
Sure. So the themes are similar to Dave's. We've got a long-standing 15+ year sort of multifamily business and mixed use. We've done some community land banking. Basically, the themes one way or the other around how to use the sort of embedded inherent power of real estate to, fuel positive transformation. And we've been led in a lot of interesting directions, sort of chasing that down. And so we have focused, like a lot of people. I mean, there are guys and gals doing this work in every community around the country and really around the world at this point. So there's nothing particularly unusual about what Dave and I do. But I think some of the themes that he's already mentioned that I will mention, I think demonstrate some consistency. Those would be around, we'll talk about relationships and the quality of the banking that you have. But the stuff that we've worked on, we've done food and beverage, and we've done, live music. And, one of the things that's tricky, we've done conferences. When a lot of your ideas are convening ideas and you're no longer able to convene people in the ways that you're accustomed to, it's very, very challenging. And so I think the answer to the COVID effect question for me kind of depends on, what you were working on when it happened, with whom you were working, what stage of the development process were you in? And so even when you look at a small business like mine, you know, we have legacy stabilized assets like apartment buildings that have been around for however long, and we've got management folks that run them. We've got recently completed projects, and those were the ones that were most vulnerable in COVID. They're at a very delicate and tricky part of their life cycle. I mean, for example, we had basically a brand new hospitality idea open into COVID. We had some restaurants open into COVID, and those were complicated. Then you've got things that are in construction, and you're dealing with supply chain challenges, and you're dealing with the health of your labor force. Those sorts of things are unique. And then lastly, you've got inventory projects. And those are, you know, ones that you simply haven't gotten to yet. And so how COVID affected people like Dave and me just depends on where those projects were in some of those processes. And so I think the easiest way to kind of look at them is almost, if we're trying to figure out what happened and what the effects were, it's probably a good idea just the sort of classic journalist who, what, where, when, how, and why. And so to whatever extent that helps prompt particular questions among the attendees, I think that's a pretty good way to think about it. And then just adding to that there is always this very peculiar and fascinating element of fate. Certainly folks that choose to be on the field, in the arena, however you want to put it, in this work, submit themselves to, and we certainly can mitigate risk and we can create conditions, but sometimes fate just plays a card. And folks like Dave and I have certainly experienced times where fate will hand you a great and unexpected advantage. And certainly there are times when we get the opposite. The other thing that I think is important when thinking about this, COVID spring was different than COVID summer and different from the fall. And I think all of us are kind of braced for the winter. So I think I would certainly agree with Dave. You know, so March 13th, Friday the 13th of March was I guess the day the national emergency was announced from the White House or whatever. And gee whiz, you know, within about 5 days, we lost 2 restaurants. We had a ballroom that's sort of a special event space that kind of went away. And then we had a small hotel that was immediately on the ropes. And so, you know, part of the way of thinking about it is what got lost forever, what was able to retool and pivot. And then I think it's important to remember that, you know, in these crucible experiences, there are opportunities and there are things to gain. It's not, you know, it's not just survival. I mean, there is this question of what survived, what thrived, and what died. And all 3 of those things happened for sure. But the opportunity, and I'll wrap up on this concept because I think it goes back to some of the things that Dave was talking about, really the heart of my perspective. When you're in a crucible experience like this with your direct colleagues in the company or with your lenders or with your local government partners, you learn an awful lot about each other when the situation is as dire as that was, and the economic consequences were potentially as great as they were. And I can talk about that in some more detail because I think that really is the heart of what's going on presently and what's going forward. But the clarity that came from the distress and the difficulty, really leaning on each other in terms of our great local government partners, you know, in different municipalities, each other, our lenders. You know, we got this great long-standing relationship with Freedom First Credit Union, and I called Paul Phillips and just said, you know, basically, I wanted to check in. How are you feeling? And he said, you know, we're going to help our customers and our clients and our borrowers get through this. And it was so awesome to hear an institution, a person potentially with the greatest economic risk in all this stuff, focus on the people part of it. And it just made me feel so good. Like Dave, I quickly learned, thank God I learned it before the last global financial crisis. But the real action is in lenders, in my experience, community bankers, but most especially the nonprofit lenders. The bankers, if there are any out there, will hate hearing me say that. But lenders that don't have shareholders, when you're out there doing community work, community-oriented work, having that aligned values, like Paul Phillips expressed to me on the phone, we're going to help these people get through this. And the other thing he said, which was so great, was, look, we got money to lend. I mean, we're looking for great projects with great people that make communities better. So I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. Before we go to the second question, Dave, does anything come to mind you want to share before we wrap up the first question? Anything else you want to add?
From my perspective, I think Ed's said that really well. And I think really, in a situation like this, it really does come down to, like, we have our sort of, I would say, our little communities within communities, and we have our team here, and then it goes out beyond that to the banking folks, the government, all of that, and then our customers too, So, but I think the power of brand is really important in times like this. It's not just our own brands, but the banking brands, even the community brands, all that, and how our customers and react to all that stuff. It's really, really important. And I think in times like this, you can really see how that is leveraged. So I don't know.
Okay.
That's all I would really add.
Yeah, thank you for both sharing how it impacted your current business. I want to turn now to the second question. Kind of theme of this panel, this event is, I know both of you have projects you were planning in 2020, 2021 and beyond, pre-pandemic, and I want to know how your thinking has been informed, how the pandemic has informed your thinking about your planning for new projects. And are you still planning to do all the projects you thought you were going to do pre-pandemic? Are you altering the mix? Might be more multifamily, less retail? Are you thinking more rural or urban? And I know thinking could change again in 90 days, but where you are right now, Dave, do you want to share kind of how COVID has impacted and informed your planning for future development?
Well, it might seem like we're really comfortable with all this crazy risk doing the projects that we do out in some of these small communities, but we're actually really risk averse. And so we try really hard to de-risk a lot of these projects and not get into things that we don't really, understand fundamentally. We do have one, I would say, like, event-driven thing. We're doing a harbor revitalization down here in Petersburg, and that's it's still touch and go. We have a lot of planning to do and thinking forward into next year to even make it viable. So we're not just putting the brakes on it, but that's a great example of a project that, I don't know where that's going to go, but we don't have a ton invested in it. We're willing to take some risk and see where that leads. On the flip side, I feel like we can't build apartments fast enough, frankly, so I do wish that, we're not putting the brakes on any of that kind of stuff. If we're worried about anything, it's same with industrial. If we had more warehouse, we would lease it. So there's certain things like that where that's been very exposed as like very aggressive, and the vacancy rate is very low, and we wish we could do more of that kind of thing. But so we're not putting the brakes on any of those apartment projects. We're full steam ahead. We do have one in Martinsville. It's a little more reliant than I would like on the commercial, folks coming through. But it's a small project, and we're willing to move forward with it. So we're not stopping any of that stuff. On the brewing side, same thing. We've got a project down in York County coming up, another one in Amherst, and now that we've seen how this summer and fall have gone, I think and people aren't traveling as much. We're actually the benefit, as long as we run them properly and sort of COVID proof them. We're changing a little bit. You know, people aren't sitting at bars these days, stuff like that. We are thinking about the programming of some of these spaces, but they are very well supported right now. Talking about, you know, planning outdoor space and things like that. So we feel very confident in the future. And the one thing we're curious about is office, but we just purchased a building in Richmond that's you know, an office building, and we feel strongly that that's not going anywhere, even though there's a lot of talk about people working from home and whatnot. I know that's happening right now, but I think ultimately people do want to be together. They need to be together. You know, the collaborative thing is really important. I can speak to our own experience here. I think if everyone in this office was working at home, I don't think we would have the same spark and the same energy that we do from being together and thinking about things, and even in sort of informal ways, just being together and team building. Really, really important to our process. So I think that translates to lots of businesses. There's no question in my mind that lots of jobs can be done from home, but I think the office component is a necessary, critical one. So we're betting on that. So that's, you know, that's our outlook generally. But I think we're not in. I think Ed's maybe a little bit more in the space where, you know, there's events and things like that's happening, which I know that has been extremely impacted, and it's hard to see the future there. Our space down here in Petersburg is outdoors, so I'm not sure where that leads, but we don't have any real other investments in that space.
Okay, thank you, Gabe. I'll turn the same question to you, Ed. How is it impacting your planning for future projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, when all of us come through an experience like this, the first thing that we wanted to do was to try to save what was sort of at least lost in the spring. And so we've been able to do that. And like Dave reported, there've been some very interesting things. So we've got an 18-room luxury small hotel in downtown Salem, Virginia, that was reopened with Marshall Hotels doing the management. They've done a spectacular job. And that project, in the teeth of COVID, is cash flow positive right now, which, you know, boy, if you'd asked me on March 20th what the outcome of that project was going to be, I don't think I would have predicted that. The short answer to your question is, and the clarity that's come from the experience points to focusing more on person and partner quality than ever before. And we were always really focused on it. And so that has really led us to double down in Danville, Virginia, because, you know, as far as I know, there's no better good government story in the state of Virginia than what's going on in Danville right now. Their professional management is wonderful. The Economic Development Office is second to none, with the office that Telly Tucker built and Corey Bobe is now in charge of. The political leadership is terrific. And I think also, and this is something for the attendees that are in local government, I cannot stress enough how important it is to have really engaged, progressive, IDAs and EDAs. I mean, that is just the point where so many communities are divided between sort of getting left behind and doing innovative work. So I think the short answer is we are more focused on good government than ever. We've got great lenders, we've got a great development team, we've got great products, we've got great concepts. We're always going to find something interesting to do. But if we can't find a community with a really healthy professional and political local government leadership, COVID is not the time to be sort of swimming against, you know, that current. So I would say that is probably the biggest. And I will say, you know, we're getting ready to open. I think we get our certificate of occupancy on the B, which is our new 47-room luxury small hotel in the River District in Danville today. You know, gee whiz, you don't, you know, that's what I was talking about at the beginning. You would never choose to be building, a project like that in the jaws of COVID. But as Dave will tell you, and a lot of your attendees know, once you start construction, you cannot stop. You cannot stop because the money's getting spent. You have got to just bust ass across the finish line, get open and get stabilized. And so, you would think that we would be concerned about that, but I'm really excited and optimistic about it. I mean, it's an amazing time in Danville, and that fundamentally is what I'm looking for, which is a bunch of great guys and gals on the playground to go do some, interesting and high impact work together. And there's no substitute for an inspired local government to help get that done, along with inspired community-focused private capital.
Let me just follow up on your hotels. How are you marketing? Have you changed how you're marketing, advertise hotel? I'm just curious to know how you've planned to roll that out.
I mean, I think that, everybody has, everybody not only has to feel safe, you got to do everything you can to make people safe. I've been very intrigued to have done some travel, and I feel really good about, even how the big chains are doing it, and it's been very interesting. Occupancy in Danville, even in the worst of COVID, was higher than you would have expected. So people are still traveling. We're going to do everything we can to keep people safe and do all the customary stuff, but beyond that, all you can do is best practices. And I don't think, I don't think there's any particular COVID related marketing per se. I think that we've got, this awesome hotel in the River District in this awesome little city. And I think the Danville Renaissance is really at the heart of our, of where we're coming from. And if somebody'd asked me, jeepers, even 5 years ago, hey Ed, what are the odds that you're going to be, I guess we've got 5 or 6 projects in inventory here, and I would have said it was less than 0.1%. But boy, am I glad that projects like this are happening in places like Danville, and that there are still these municipalities where you can get these great things done, and like the work that Dave's done in Petersburg for so long. It's fun when you see a community and its leadership really fueling a renaissance and a transformation. It is a lot of fun to be on the court with them.
And Dave, do you want to talk about your experience with? I know you've worked in a lot of small towns or rural areas. How important local government is to work with you?
Yeah, we do. I'm thinking of Bedford. Bedford's been really an amazing place to be. And I think when we first went there was a lot. I mean, really, it's like a lot of these projects, people say, what do you think? What could possibly compel you to go and do a brewery project in a town of 6,000 people in Bedford? And that's what I love about what we do, working with the folks there, both on the county side and the town side. We're that particular business is Beals Beer is distributing now all over the state. We're setting new records every month, where I like to think the craft beer of choice now out in that part of the state, all the way out to, through not just Lynchburg, but all the way out west, doing great with Blue Ridge Beverage out there. So I like to buck conventional wisdom. We like to prove things wrong and show folks how we can make destination projects really work. It's really, the payoff is amazing. And I'm not, the financial thing aside, just the emotional payoff, the momentum you get from projects like that. So I think we're on our 3rd and 4th project now in the town of Bedford, which, I would never have thought that, but the apartments are in very high demand there, and it's a beautiful place to be. And so I'm thrilled, and I love that we're working down around Fast C and Blackstone, and are on our 3rd projects down there, and they're doing incredibly well. And even up in Amherst, Amherst County has made a decision to be more business friendly over the last couple of years, and that is really we're doing our 3rd project in Amherst County, which is really exciting. And so I think that makes a massive difference when the community can partner with us in that way and be a conduit for grants and clear the way for some of the resistance you get from the community that typically is could be uninformed or haven't seen projects like this before and are worried about change and whatnot. A good county administrator and a board of supervisors or a town manager and economic development folks can really make a massive, massive difference. And I think if you see what's happening in Bedford or some of the stuff we're doing in Amherst County, it's a classic example of that. And of course, we were watching what's happening in Danville, and it's really amazing. So, that's what we're looking for. When it's not just, we are doing a lot of placemaking, but we're not. And as the developer, we're just one of the participants in that decision. The county or the town also is making that decision. And thankfully, we do have lots of banking partners that really deeply believe in what we're doing. So we can really present any project, and make a case for it. But we've got to have the town on board, helping us and being a conduit for things or going the extra mile to make a project happen.
Great, thank you. Kind of a question that came up is, how would you I'm sure you've worked in larger cities as well. Any comparison, any, difference between working in a larger municipality than a smaller municipality? Any experiences you'd share or have?
Well, I can speak to that. I mean, the bigger ones for sure, you're going into this sort of, my experience is into this meat grinder of, expense and code review. And there's no real incentive to necessarily help you out, so to speak. You're just kind of one of many developers. But I would say in small towns, in my experience, it's very easy to get things through code or, with one or two exceptions. I had a crazy experience down in Wilson, North Carolina around this, but for the most part, it's more about communication with the community, and that's where we spend a lot of time, and just making sure that we're as transparent as possible. Everyone knows what we're doing. The county, like in Bedford, we've gone over and above what I think was probably necessary, which is great. Having public meetings, doing what we need to do to make sure everyone understands the project and no one feels left out of the process. But generally speaking, on the flip side, just getting through code and all this stuff, I could not have had better experiences than I've had in places like Bedford and some of these small towns.
Okay, thank you. Another question came in, and folks, please feel free to use the Q&A box to submit questions. Once the public health issues relating to the pandemic abate, what do you think won't go back to normal? What won't go back to the way it was pre-pandemic? Ed, do you have any thoughts about that? Have you thought about that?
I mean, that's, I think that's very difficult. I just feel like we're all learning just how inept we are at predicting the future or knowing what the implications are. So, I mean, I really can't comment on that. I think I can comment though on the resilience of communities to keep moving forward. I mean, I can't say what won't change, except, it's like, I do think that spirit that, so many communities have that have the good fortune of having great local government, and folks that care about them, that stuff is, it turns out, pretty hard to limit, which is really wonderful news. I think we've got a situation where we've really been stress tested, and folks like Dave and like my colleagues and myself, and our partners in places like Danville and Salem, are, very future focused, which is pretty awesome, pretty interesting to me.
Okay, another question. The more people working from home and might be working from home post-pandemic, have you thought about, as you plan new multifamily projects about incorporating more space for home office? Has that come across your mind, thought process yet, Dave, Ed?
Honestly, I would say yes, but maybe in a different way. We're probably not going to create more space because you really do have a market situation. It's like, what are people willing to pay per square foot? That they have that kind of stuff. But I also think we are thinking about the internet a lot, and the speeds, the cost, all that kind of stuff, because we know that that's I think it's been on the table even before this, but we're working right now in Amherst to get the fiber out to certain locations where we can make sure we have it. We just brought it into another property we have out in Goshen, Virginia, just making sure that we can provide the connection. We are losing customers right now in Amherst County because we don't have reliable internet in certain parts of the county. So that's very, very key. People, even we have certain Airbnbs that we run, and we are losing customers because they want to rent that space from us at an absolute premium, but they got to make sure that they can work from that space. And if we can't provide the internet to them, we're dead, So huge deal where we're building more on the hospitality side. It's not really so much with, the apartments, absolutely, but on the hospitality side, Airbnbs and vacation places, you got to be very well wired or you're not going to make it.
Great. Just remind everybody to submit your questions to the Q&A box, not the chat box at the bottom. Another question came up, what are examples of creative ways EDAs and IDAs are helping stimulate projects? Ed, do you want to take that?
Sure. Boy, it's been really interesting. I love the work. Some of the best work done in the last 25 years in Virginia was done in Lynchburg with Margette Upshur and some of her colleagues. They did a lot of very interesting stuff around, strategic lending, that sort of stuff. EDAs and IDAs, I think when they can do a transformational kind of loan fund, that is awesome because, I'm one of those folks that wants to see a very successful, very wealthy capital participant EDA or IDA. So when an EDA is fortunate enough to have a city council and management that understands how important it is to invest in them as a conduit, really wonderful things can happen. And furthermore, the IDA can be enriched with interest payments, and fees associated with doing these loans. And so sometimes when you're doing these things that are trickier and you've got a conventional lender, but you're having trouble finding, all the capital, when an EDA or an IDA can step in and say, we'd really like to be part of this story, it would be wonderful. And the IDA in Danville's just, it's an unbelievably powerful force. They have north of $40 million of assets, whereas sadly, and not to point people out, but there are some cities that are, places like Roanoke, where city council honestly should be empowering that EDA with more funding. I think they have $300,000. And as a result, there's not as much positive transformation happening in places like that as there should be.
Right.
Yeah, I would add too on the EDA side, one thing we do a lot is with the Department of Housing and Community Development in some of these towns, and it's really tricky the way they have that grant program set up. We want to get the money as a grant. If you're larding up these projects with more debt, it doesn't matter how low the interest rate is, you still owe the money back. So some of the only real ways to transact a grant like that is to have the EDA actually own the property, and then you do kind of this very funky sale leaseback type stuff, but it helps make a project work. And there are places that they think that is risky or they don't want to take that risk, but it's the progressive thinking folks that actually do want to take that risk. And sometimes they have to own the property. Of course, all the liability ultimately falls on the developer with guarantees and things like that. But the EDA plays an incredibly important role in that.
I agree with exactly what Dave is saying. And I would encourage folks to think about the idea that sometimes the greatest risk is to take no risk at all. And so sometimes you will see economic development or local government actors, and they think that they shouldn't participate because it's too risky, when in fact, the reluctance to participate is the riskiest decision they could make.
Good. Thank you. Let's see. Another question is, this is a question about the prospects for office space in the next 2 to 3 years. Dave, you just bought an office building a building in Richmond it's an older building, but it's office space. Thinking about size, layouts, how you would, when you bring that to market at some point in the future, how that might look.
Yeah, I mean, the open plan thing is scaring everybody, right? And we're in the thick of it right now. And I know it's really hard to be visionary, folks, and think about the life beyond COVID. So we're thinking about that. I know we want people to make leasing decisions in the next 4 months, so it's gonna be on their mind. So the office we have is more traditional. It's sectioned, and you can close places off and have individual offices. That's what we're looking for right now. But we believe strongly in the office concept. I don't think it's going anywhere. I heard some stat the other day that 30+% of the population meets their spouse at work. And that, I think it just speaks to the social aspect of like what we all want to do. I don't think I think we're so powerfully social as a community. You can see that all the time. Everybody wants really badly to be out and be doing things and be together. And the office is a huge part of our lives. Sometimes I know we see each other, the folks we work with, more than we do our own families. So I don't think the work from home thing really is going to just suddenly consume us all. That's all we're going to be doing. It's really an important function. We are being really specific about where we're buying, what we're doing, what the product is. We're not taking any crazy chances. The thing we just bought was right outside of Scott's Addition, and that's still a very powerful force, and it's a place we want to be. But the building was a little distressed. We're going to fix that up and create some value. But we believe strongly in that product right now.
Okay, Lee, I'm going to bring you in if you're available to help me with some of these questions. I'm probably not getting them all right now, and I wanted just to make sure that I know there are more out there.
Yeah. So in the same line of thought regarding layout and building infrastructure, an attendee asked about, is there more or any focus on mechanical ventilation as a component of a whole building tenant space, basically impacting the indoor air quality? Ed, you're nodding your head. Do you mind touching on that?
Sure. Yeah. So we've just done that in, essentially every shared space that we have. So I will encourage everybody to look at that. It was not as expensive as expected. The installations have gone, really well, and so we are doing it everywhere that we possibly can, obviously it's, we want to do. We've got tenants that we've got to do everything we can to protect. And I would just encourage everybody to look at that because it's not as prohibitively expensive as I expected.
Another question. Go ahead, Leah.
I was going to say, and are you having to go back and retroactively?
Yeah.
Add this. Okay.
Yeah. It's just adding equipment to existing systems, and it's working really well. And, just like any of us, I mean, I think all of us are a little skeptical of some of this because we're new to it, but it was really great. There's systems out there that, have great peer reviewed efficacy, and, those are worthwhile investments. So we feel good about them. And our tenants are really happy about it, obviously, understandably.
I want to talk about opportunity zones. Has that driven any investments for you? Has that made you just, Ed, you're shaking your head?
Dave,
Well,
I'll let you take
I
that.
don't know. I came out publicly against the opportunity zone. I feel like it's gone to these little slivers of areas where that you have this sort of overlap between a census tract that's where you want to be and then a place like Scott's Addition. It's a bit I think of a farce, but I've benefited not at all from it. I really question whether or not someone who wants to save a few bucks on their taxes really wants to take a crazy chance in a place like Martinsville or something like that. It just those things don't really marry up to me. So I really don't think it makes sense. I think it benefits very few people who see these slivers of opportunity and already have lots of money to invest in some of these little overlap, places. But that's my 2 cents on it. I feel strongly about that, and I think there may be some situations where, you have a company want to do this or that in here and there, but I don't know.
Opportunity zones were heartbreaking to me. And we spent about $60 million with Jones Day trying to understand them. And at the end of the day, I'm being facetious, but we spent a lot of money with a lot of sophisticated folks. And at the end of the day, the problem that we ran into, because I would love for them to have been more powerful in smaller markets, but so much of the core idea has to do with appreciation. A lot of the economics has to do with appreciation, that when you look at those 7,500, census tracts, and some of them, are in Long Beach, California, and LA and Miami, those are places where if you go in and you turn a whole huge neighborhood around, the appreciation is off the charts. And so there's a reason that Steve Case and various other billionaires and hedge funds are all excited about it, because if you're trying to do a really huge, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars real estate idea that's appreciation focused, it's the neatest thing in the world. If you're trying to do, something that's transformational for a small place, it is literally very hard for me to find its applicability and its usefulness. And I've got a former student, Alex Flaxbart, who runs Opportunity Alabama. He's doing all kinds of unbelievable work, and great folks affiliated with VCC are doing the same thing in Virginia. And I'm sure they'll figure it out, but I haven't been able to figure out how it applies to folks like me.
All right. Dave, how are you innovating your brewery spaces for the winter months?
Heat, as much as possible. We're looking to make investments, and we are in outdoor heating, making sure people can be comfortable in the cold. I think there's a limit to that. I really do. But we're going to do that as much as possible. But the other thing is making sure the inside space, people are comfortable being inside too. I mean, we're lucky in that our spaces are really big, so I think we can still accommodate, a limited number of folks inside both of our breweries. But our goal is to really just extract as much of the season as we possibly can out of the outdoor spaces. I mean, that's just the facts,
Yeah. I'd say kind of in the lines of being creative and adjusting space. Dave, you hit on this earlier about, the internet kind of being critical piece to some of the projects going forward. We have an attendee asking for a little bit more detail about how you're creatively using various technologies, internet-based and other things that you're pulling into these projects of older buildings.
So, it's a two-pronged thing. I know, like, specific to Amherst, they have some CARES Act money and a couple other means of assisting with this. We tried to go right to Comcast and work with it. It's just that you get nowhere. But working through the county doing some of this stuff, we're actually physically getting the fiber network down to that property down on Route 151. We also are looking into line of sight technology. I really know little about it. We're literally in the middle of learning about that right now. But I can tell you, even in some of these other places, when the internet goes out, we can't even run credit cards. It's critical to business. We own the Winton golf course out there, and it happens when the internet goes out, we're really dead in the water. So there's multiple issues with having a really strong connection. So we have marketing issues, just collecting money issues. So we're still trying to figure out some of that technology. I have a couple of things we're looking at right now that are, I don't really know how it all works, but we need solutions to that. So we're in the middle of investigating that.
Yeah, Ed, I see you're shaking your head. Anything to add to that?
No, I think we all know, I'm sure everybody out there, nodding their heads. I mean, somewhere along the line, it's like rural electrification. Internet access is a utility. It is something that we should be using, every governmental, nonprofit, and for-profit lever that we possibly can to get it everywhere. It's sort of insane. My grandchildren, it'll probably be like, rural water or electrification will be like, so not everybody had this when, it's unthinkable in most parts of the world. And it's real sad that we've had such a tough time surmounting that. But it's real fun to hear, Dave talking about line of sight and last mile stuff on 151. I mean, that's the Lord's work.
And I guess we're headed towards the end of our session, and it's kind of a two-part question that's come in from the audience. So one, as a way to close, what would you say the best development opportunities are currently in this environment? And then the other piece of this is we have folks wondering how they get you to come to their community for these types of opportunities. So if you could highlight where you see where you're seeing trends and opportunities in development, real estate development, and then what sparks your interest in those opportunities and in those localities. Dave?
Yeah, so we're actually trending with our company a little bit more into business creation. We've started a couple of businesses, and what I've found, in Bedford's a great example. There's others. Petersburg, awesome example of all this talent hanging around, and I feel like it's one of our jobs is to aggregate and organize that, and we have a few things that we've done which are really exciting. Just outside of real estate, creating a business and then using that business to be the tenant in a space, and that can be a pretty cool thing. We use the enterprise zone, local to enterprise zones and state enterprise zones to generate operating capital for some of this stuff through the real estate program. It's all in how this gets stacked. Where we want to, a lot of times we just, it's really a matter of just hearing the story in terms of attracting someone like me, hearing the story, what's going on, or what can we create, what kind of destination type thing we can create. Sometimes in the middle of nowhere. I mean, that's the fun part of it. When it works, it's amazing. But I'll be honest with you, there's no rule of thumb. There's no roadmap. That's part of the cool part about all this. I, like Ed said before, sometimes if he said, would you thought you'd been in XYZ town, doing $10 million worth of work, you just think it's nuts. But here we are in many of those places doing exactly that. I love what's happened here in Petersburg. It's incredible. I look back at some of the aerial shots sometimes that we have hanging on the wall, and it's like, I just can't even believe how far this place has come. And I think that is really been inspirational to lots of people. But I think for me personally, that really it's just a matter of wanting to get something done and everybody wanting the same thing. And I truly believe that, whether it's a real estate project or a business, if it's a good idea and everyone's behind it, the world will conspire to make it be so. And that is really one of the biggest lessons I've learned. And I think that's something that if we all really, I mean, it's all around us, it's all happening in all these projects. So it's all doable. We just got to, partner up to get it done.
Yeah. And you, Ed, how would you answer that question? How do they?
To me, and I think there are a lot of ways that Dave and I approach this in very similarly, although they do so much more operational than is interesting to me. And I really admire that a lot because I don't consider that an aptitude. We have certainly started and run businesses, most of which have been successful, but it doesn't capture my my curiosity and creativity the way some of this other work does. And I think the answer to the question for me, and I do think for some practitioners, this work is highly, highly personal. And it's highly, a lot of mine is motivated by just pure curiosity. There is certainly some gentle oppositional defiance that goes into it, because like Dave, whenever somebody says, well, this neighborhood doesn't matter and those people don't matter, my first thought is, well, yes, it does, and of course it deserves attention. I'm on the call today from Schoolfield in Danville, and it's just a fantastic neighborhood, some great buildings, and I'm up here, lots of times every week, running and walking and just seeing what it's all about, because that's what's interesting to me right now. So the best opportunities are, what capture your attention, and then once they do, it's like a gauntlet. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Like Dave was saying, I wonder what the story is, or I wonder what happened there. Then there's a fork in the road where if you come across, really unimpressive professional town or city leadership, you're just sort of crestfallen because you're very discouraged at the odds of being able to make something special happen where you have that resistance or lack of inspiration or defensiveness. If you're lucky, as we are here in Danville, and you're met with folks that go, oh, well, that's interesting, tell me more. And then it becomes conversational, and it becomes collaborative, and it becomes creative and accretive. What you find yourself, I say it all the time, to me, it's like being in a band. I mean, you've got all these people that are specialists in what they do. And a bass player can't play a saxophone, but boy, he sure respects the person that can and understands how all that fits together. And fundamentally, a band is, is about respecting the other person's role and not stepping on them, and figuring out how to work together, and having the stamina to go through a very, very long process. I tell my students at WNO all the time, these projects die 1,000 deaths. I mean, you just get bad news every week, but you also get some good news. And the fun part about the bad news is if you're lucky enough to have some really great guys and gals around the table, it's what I loved about being a lawyer. It's like, hey, we got this really tricky thing. What are we going to do about that? And we figure it out. So for me, it's very much lifestyle, and it's creativity, and it's curiosity, and it's colleagues.
Thank you. I think that wraps up our time for answering questions. In closing, I just want to thank Dave and Ed for their time today to share their experience and thinking. Really appreciate the energy you put into this discussion today. And I want to thank our co-host, McGarvers Consulting and the Virginia Economic Developers Association for helping us promote this event. This event is recorded, and Leo, how folks want to pass it on to their friends and colleagues, how would they get access to that?
Yeah, stay tuned. We'll send out a follow-up email early next week that will have a link to this recording and a survey to give us ideas on other topics and speakers that we can pull together. So that'll go out early next week.
Well, great. Well, we had at one point up to 200 participants on this, and I want to thank everybody who stayed through and listened. I think we all learned a lot and appreciate everyone's time today and their help to make this possible. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
for having us.
Thank you.
See you soon, Dave.
All right.